All right, this is going to be a film study about DeAndre Hopkins. I focused it in on his first 5 games played in the 2023 season. Of course, we know he was not able to play in weeks 1 through 6 because of a PED suspension. DeAndre Hopkins, 30 years old, carries a huge cap number next year. I'm a Ravens content creator, but this video really applies to, I think, multiple teams who are already out there, looking for how to improve the wide receiver position. It seems like every fan base, or parts of every fan base, claim that their team doesn't have enough weapons. The Bills, the Ravens. Look, to be honest with you, the team that the Chiefs just won the AFC Championship game with, the receiver and tight end talent they just put out there, and running back talent collectively, the position player talent on offense that they just beat the Bengals with at home, where would you rate that group? Travis Kelce's a Hall of Famer. Not talking about Patrick Mahomes, talking about receivers, tight ends, running backs. I don't think they're a tremendously talented group in terms of their resume, the guys who finished and competed in most of that game. The depth that the Chiefs had, however, I think is what really won them the game because they found a matchup, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, against Mike Hilton, that the Bengals wouldn't adapt from or couldn't do so. Look, should your team sign or go get DeAndre Hopkins? I guess it depends on who your team is. Mine is the Ravens, and I sat and watched. I'll be honest with you, my initial impression or my thought coming into this was that I didn't think he was worth it. He didn't, in the small snips that I saw, I didn't think he looked tremendously agile. I didn't think I saw a lot of fast twitch after the catch. But after watching the 5 games, I'm totally convinced that someone, Bills, Ravens, Cowboys, whoever, is going to go out there and get DeAndre Hopkins if the Cardinals make him available. We're going to go through film from week 7 through 11, and I'm going to just talk about the things that I saw. You'll see him spot shadowed prior to a lot of plays. You're going to see him going up against multiple different corners or DBs. They use him in the slot. They use him as the X. He's 6'1", 215, something like that, but plays a lot bigger, if you ask me. It can take over possessions, and I think that's the thing that I was surprised about. I'm not surprised that a guy like DeAndre Hopkins can make some plays, but in this 5-game stretch, I have 3, maybe 4 possessions that he just completely took over, meaning 3, 4, 5 catches on that possession. And after watching this one, I was a little concerned. I was like, wow, he's getting jacked up by rookie Alontae Taylor. I do have a little bit of note to make about his stance, but oftentimes it doesn't matter because he's not seeing press man. His stance, he's a little bit sometimes canted, a little more forward than my eyes think most other receivers are. But I haven't studied a ton of other receivers that are at that level that DeAndre Hopkins is at with the incredible production that he's had. If he was able to stay healthy in 2021 and 2022, you're looking at a clear Hall of Fame guy with the just sheer number of catches that he had. But in any case, he doesn't see a ton of press man, and as a Ravens fan, you don't see a ton of press man either. I mean, third downs you do, don't get me wrong. 3 times, like I said, he just took over the possession. Why is that a big deal? It causes the defensive coordinator to have to change the coverages he's using. The Cardinals, look, to be honest with you, they use him expertly sometimes to free up his release in certain moments. They'll bring him in like the stacked twins. This is a 2nd and 7, third possession. The stacked twins, they get him isolated against the nickel to the field, and look at the separation that's there. I think he can play in the slot. He can play as the outside receiver. He can play on the right side. He can play on the left side. Some receivers just go left and right. Some receivers only play in the slot. Some guys only play as the outside receiver. In my opinion, there's a couple of characteristics to DeAndre Hopkins that make him a really attractive potential acquisition for at least 3 or 4 teams that are trying to win a Super Bowl in the NFL. As a Ravens fan, to be honest with you, I think one thing that is very important is that you have 3 guys who can take over possessions. Lamar Jackson, clearly. J.K. Dobbins, Mark Andrews. Who's the 4th? I mean, you can say that there were times where Isaiah likely had big moments, but we didn't see it happen that often. He's a rookie, so who knows how he'll explode or grow next year. 2-point conversion play against, I think this is Chris Harris Jr., a clear hold from the All-22. You'll get the end zone angle. I'll slow it down a little bit. I thought that Hopkins would be lacking burst. I did. I didn't think he would win as many balls outside the numbers, from the bottom of the numbers to the sideline, as I saw in this film that I think I had 74 plays initially saved. I cut it down to 55, and now it's down to like 40 to show you guys. I was wrong. I just was straight wrong. He at 6'1", 215 plays bigger still and stronger than most of the guys that are guarding him. That's not new for any of you at all, or any of us. He's effective everywhere. I just was kind of surprised that even still, after missing a lot of time in 2021 and then being suspended for 6 games in 2022, that he still played so big against the younger DBs that he was going against. Like I said, effective outside the numbers, out-breaking routes, he's a monster. Outside the numbers, outside the bottom of the numbers to the sideline, he's a monster. I feel like that ball's thrown a little bit behind him, to be honest with you. I feel like ball should have been thrown, more towards the sideline on this speed out. I'm not going to comment on every single play, to be honest with you. I'll let him run one or two times for you to see it. Absolutely devastating, in my opinion, outside the numbers to the sideline in this 5-game stretch. I know that later in the year, he didn't have a double-digit catch game after, I think, week 13. I could be wrong there. Maybe it was week 14. But he still had like 7 catches on 12 targets. I think 6 catches on 11 targets. And then a 7 catch on 10 target game. His catch percentage rate is high. That's another thing that I think is very attractive to some of these other teams, is that you're not... Now, he did get a lot of targets, don't get me wrong, especially when he came back in week 7. But he doesn't need a lot of targets to generate a ton of catches because he's a high percent catch guy. At least the numbers that I saw career-wise for him was a high percent catch guy. And at the end of this video, I will show you, or I'll describe to you, the percent for these 5 games that I studied. And I don't think it's a tremendous anomaly. Here's an example of the work that he does from the bottom of the numbers on down. This is Alontae Taylor. This ball was thrown, by Kyler Murray well before there's any break or anything. Just a back shoulder fade, but kind of like we call it a trust fade, meaning it's not thrown necessarily towards the sideline as much. It's just underthrown for real, intentionally. You can do this to this guy. He can win jump balls. He can win underthrown back shoulder fades. I'm going to show you a play against the Vikings. It's an unbelievable catch against Harrison Smith. He can just overpower certain corners. He's just that strong at 6'1", 215. Week 8 against the Vikings had a tremendous game. I always like to look at third downs. Now, this is a 2nd and 10, okay? But it's another outbreaking route. Look at the separation that's created against, I think it's Dantzler. It's a 2nd and 10, so it's not a third down. I like to look at third downs for receivers and tight ends and quarterbacks and find 10, 15, 18 third downs in a row and kind of look at them and see what they're doing. This guy produces on third down. He does. Still, I'm sure that he was an absolute phenom on third down 2020, 2019, 2018 when 100-plus catches pretty much every year. He still looks pretty damn good at it to me. I'll talk about the salary structure later, how a team like the Bills, Ravens, Cowboys acquire someone like this. I mean, I'm changing, or I have had my mind changed, let me rephrase that, by watching this film. And I actually enjoy that process, like kind of having a assumption or a thought for a player and then finding out that I was wrong. This is out and up because that's available to him often because of how often he does run the speed out, deep speed out, just an out cut. These are available to him. There's no time for the quarterback to get it off, but you can see there's time to throw the football. You also have a safety here who, be able to maybe recover if the ball's thrown, more towards the hash. In my opinion, DeAndre Hopkins fits with a Ravens offense with Mark Andrews and Lamar Jackson and Isaiah Likely perfectly, and I'll explain why a little bit later. This is like a go out. Some people call it a fade out, whatever. It's outside release, go, and then bringing it back to the sideline. Huge amount of separation. Maybe the ball could have been thrown slightly sooner. He seems like a guy that Kyler Murray and any quarterback would trust to throw this ball now. A little bit sooner than it was thrown here to get him the ball when there was a little bit more separation. He's matched up against a wide variety of DBs in this film that I'm showing you. Tariq Woolen, Jalen Ramsey, Cameron Dantzler, like I've pointed out, and Alontae Taylor, young guys. This is another possession, 4th drive against the Vikings. This is 2nd 8. He just takes over. I think we get 4 consecutive catches or maybe 4 consecutive targets here. 13-yard gain over the middle, kind of pushes off on a safety or a nickel playing inside there. Great at finding space underneath. Not saying I didn't think that the guy could play prior to watching these games, okay? But what I am saying is I see a guy who could still end up with 90-plus catches. I mean, for real, if he played every game. And I think that one thing that's going to be considered by NFL front offices is 2021 missed time for injury, right? You can correct me if I'm wrong. This past year, 2022, he missed time for a PED suspension. You'd have to assume that he's learned his lesson there and wouldn't want a second one. This is an unbelievable touchdown catch on that same drive that I was just talking about. One-handed catch behind Harrison Smith. And again, I think when you get this guy a free, I'm not saying he's not good against press man. In these 5 games, however, when he had a free release to operate from the top of the numbers on down or somewhere in that area, he was totally devastating. When he was jammed up, there was times where he was not as effective. I like what Arizona does with him. They kind of bring him in and stack him here. Stack twins, add the running back to that side as well, so they can kind of clear out space by the running back running out into the flats. One-on-one with Harrison Smith. Unbelievable one-hand catch. Show you the end zone angle of it, too. I focused on the third downs, like I said. I think there are 13 of them in this video. I might be wrong. It might be 15. So I tried to show you a lot of them. This is a 3rd and 2 that I think should be very noticeable for Ravens fans. Why did the Ravens end up 10-7 this year? Because they sucked in the red zone. Part of that was play calling. Part of that was offensive design and adjustment during the games, for sure. But this guy can certainly make anyone look better in the red zone. Anyone, meaning coaching staff or quarterback, he can make them look better because of stuff like this. I think he's a huge asset for the Baltimore Ravens, potentially. Obviously, the salary structure, the trade, any kind of trade, how that works out, don't ask me. You know, I could speculate on that. We do that in our Discord all the time, and it's kind of fun because it's no fear about, posting it on Twitter and then looking stupid when someone's like, hey, that doesn't work. People will correct you, but it's just an opportunity to kind of throw out ideas and conjecture and then talk about it over the course of the next 10 or 20 minutes. Look, bottom of the numbers on down to the sideline. 5th possession, the very next possession after that unbelievable touchdown catch. Again, it's an out-breaking route. You'll see it from the all-22 angle here. I think any team that has some talent that operates in this area well, tight ends like Mark Andrews, or maybe in this area well, bottom of the numbers to the hash, so the hook curl area, something like that. Any team that has complementary players in terms of where they operate, this guy would just make everyone better. Maybe you're not running complementary routes. He's an X. I mean, he's an X receiver for real. He can operate one-on-one. Rashad Bateman is an X receiver, but Hopkins lines up everywhere. I think you can use him anywhere. It's kind of unbelievable how wrong I was. But again, I don't get a chance to watch Cardinals film during the season, and occasionally we'll watch them live. This is cover 2, just running up the left sideline. Exceptionally tough, if you ask me. Physical. There is a name that I don't want to say. Who he reminds me of, a veteran wide receiver who was extremely tough. Played through contact. Made one-on-one catches that the Ravens signed 10 years ago, maybe 11 years ago, that he reminds me of. Salary structure is clearly an issue, no doubt. It's another touchdown pass on a 3rd down. A little drag from the top side of the screen. Just outmaneuvers, I think, a linebacker. Nice design, clearing it out to the bottom side of the screen. 3rd and 2, touchdown catch. Just so you know, if you're familiar with my channel at all, I talk about mesh a lot. Mesh being 2 drags. And I have long maintained that this area is what opens up when the running back runs a wheel to that side. Mesh typically involves running back wheel. Sometimes it turns into a wheel sit, so he's come back to the sideline. Hopefully you guys can see that. And then 2 drags. And I have often maintained that this wheel by the running back clears out the area that he runs through. He's the first player through that area. Now this is man, okay? Some type of match here. Hopkins is running through onto the area that running back has cleared. 22-yard touchdown catch that really probably is one of the easiest touchdown catches that DeAndre Hopkins has ever had. salary structure look clearly an issue no matter where he ends up. The Cardinals may keep him. We understand the injury to Kyler Murray. It's going to take him a long time to get back, obviously. They may keep him. They might. But they're terrible on defense in a lot of ways. And this situation with Hopkins being, I think, 30 years old, going to turn 31 this year, I think. The value that Hopkins potentially has to other teams is a real opportunity to the Cardinals. I know that maybe it's in their best interest to keep him if they're trying to compete. In my opinion, I don't think they are. I mean, they're trying to compete, but without Kyler Murray, I don't know how they win consistently against some of the teams that they're going to face, even with their schedule they'll have next year. $19 million salary in 2023, this year coming up, with a $30 million cap hit, huge number, for being 31 years old this season upcoming. And then 2024, $15 million salary, but a $26 million cap hit. And then unrestricted free agent in 2025. And here's where I think it gets interesting for these teams that might want to sign him. First of all, I think this ball is a little thrown behind him against Tariq Woolen, just kind of matching this. Middle of the field. Good design. Good design by the Cardinals. They're getting the underneath route to hold this linebacker. And then Hopkins is able to, bring this back, throw it over the top of the linebacker into that vacated space. Just bait with the tight end, running underneath. Ball's thrown a little bit behind. I think it's interesting, though, for real. You're not looking for DeAndre Hopkins to be the 28-year-old version of DeAndre Hopkins for 6 years or 5 years. Can he be that guy for 30 games in the next 2 years? I'm talking about 15 regular season games in 2023, 15 regular season games in 2024. Yeah, there's no reason why he can't. Again, injury was why he missed a lot of time in 2021, but not in 2022. That was a PED suspension. So you're talking about he's off the books after 2024. Cap is going up anyway, right? He becomes an unrestricted free agent in 2025. If you wanted to be pessimistic, you'd say, hey, he's not going to be real motivated to, this is a fourth down, by the way, one of the third, fourth down situations I saw that Kyler Murray really didn't take a serious look to his side. He does glance over here before scrambling and then fumbling it. Seahawks forced a lot of turnovers just through sheer effort. Interesting team. But you'll see Kyler Murray will glance over here briefly, but one of the few third, fourth down situations where I didn't see him take a serious look at DeAndre Hopkins. Now, this is a deeper speed out past the sticks on a 4th and 4. He's already moved on to the next part of the progression. It's all clogged up here, and he takes off running. I think it's an interesting proposition for some of these teams that his salary comes off the books after 2024. You get a 2-year run at a guy who maybe can produce like this. Week 10 against the Rams, 10 catches on 14 targets. That's pretty good percent. Breakdown, I believe that's 5 out of 7. And 98 yards, I think, 98, 92 yards. Yeah, 98 yards. It's a 3rd and 15. It's not that he doesn't run in-breaking routes. Obviously, you've seen some here. I feel like he's excellent at reading coverage and sitting down where he should. Just so you know, in case you're not familiar, and I'm not saying that's what's happening here. There are a lot of choice routes that people have now. 3rd and 15 is probably not that situation where the receiver will be, reading the safety, and if the safety were to, spin down, then he might take this route vertical. If the safety was to stay high, then he'll sit down over the top of this linebacker level, presumably inside of the corner in the soft spot in the zone or the match concept. And then, then you have other reads. If the safety was to go high, spin high, like a cover 3, then maybe you'd take this to the middle of the field and sit down, presumably between the two inside linebackers that are your hook to curl droppers in cover 3. I'm not saying that that's necessarily what he's doing here. I'm saying to you, I've seen plays where I suspect he is doing that, and it's very instinctual. It's very quick. I don't think DeAndre Hopkins needs really much coaching at all. He is a finished product in terms of what he's able to do, how he's able to adjust. I think it's very minimal. It's not like you're going to have to show him 8 reps on the field every week to get him to do a particular read. He's already going to know how to do the damn read. There's going to be film that you as a coach can see of him successfully doing that read. Hopefully that I said that in a way that makes sense. Second possession, this is a 3rd and 3. Ball's thrown a little high. Again, he drifts. So basically, snag flat, is what it is. But, some people call it curl flat, whatever. And then this is where Hopkins is trying to sit. He sits in this area for a moment. Jalen Ramsey's sitting right in the way because Jalen Ramsey's incredibly intelligent, right? So then he's going to drift this way. Ball ends up being thrown a little high, I think. One of the few where I saw him get his hands on it and not make the catch. I don't know if this goes down as a drop or not. It's clearly high. If I had the end zone angle, I think I'd be able to prove it to you. But that's, it's not really the point of my video. I mean, if you want to get caught up in it, go right ahead. High catch percent guy, in my opinion. A guy who you can throw the ball to 7 times in a game, and reliably he's going to get 5 catches just because of his experience level, how physical he is against DBs. This is a 2nd and 8 over the middle. Plays through contact well. Hangs on to the football. Did have 2 fumbles this year. I don't pretend to know the exact circumstances of them, but when I said or alluded to the fact that he reminded me of Anquan Bolden, I meant it. A guy who's very physical at the catch point, very physical after catching the football. And I think with the short commitment on his salary, you're going to see, on his contract, you're going to see someone go get him if the Cardinals make him available. I don't know who it would be. As a Ravens fan, I thought when I saw the social media posts in the last 2 weeks about going and getting DeAndre Hopkins, whenever I see 10, 12, 14, 15 people saying the same thing, my background, Irish, Scottish, I immediately go the other way. That's just the way that we're made. That's the way my blood pumps. But after going back and watching the film, if that happened, as long as we're not giving up a first-round pick, which I would not give up a first-round pick at all for DeAndre Hopkins, as long as we're not giving up a first-round pick, I'd be very interested. I don't know about you, if you're a Ravens fan, Bills fan, Cowboys fan, whatever. With the short commitment and a guy who, if you trust what I'm showing you and you trust the stats that I'm going to read out to you here in a moment, can still produce at a high level. Here's the stats. By the way, this is another possession where he took over. Doesn't look super smooth on some of these cuts, don't get me wrong, on this bubble. But they throw it out here to him, and he gets a pretty good gain. I think it's an 8-yard gain. One play after the little wheel fade that he called here. I just rewound it one play, by the way. They just widened the nickel up to give him a free release. I think the Cardinals do a great job of this, making sure that he's got a free release. Just a little wheel that's not designed to go up the field all the way, so wheel out. We had called it before, but whatever you want to call it. This is another example of him taking over a possession. Here's the stats from the 5-game stretch that I'm showing you film from. Week 7 through 11, 2023. 5 games, 58 targets, 45 catches. That's an incredibly high catch percentage, isn't it? 40 out of 50, that'd be 80%, right? 4 out of 5 is 80. So then you get the next 8 targets, he catches 5. So that's 62%, but that's on a small sample size, 5 out of 8. So I'm just doing this in my head, to be honest with you. I think it's about 77, 78% catch percentage in this stretch. And they're not all just like this one. I mean, I know that this one, is short. I know the wheel out or wheel, sit, whatever you want to call it. He was wide open. The Cardinals manipulated the coverage. He's been a high percent catch guy for pretty much his whole career. Evidence of that it wasn't all easy short catches in the stretch that I'm describing to you. He had 487 yards receiving in those 5 games. He had 2 100-yard receiving games, I think, and 2 that were close to it. So 77, 78% in this 5-game stretch. Here's a 9-catch, 92-yard game against San Francisco. And look, just so you know, most of the plays I'm showing you here are from early in the game. I'm not showing you plays from 3rd and 4th quarter when they were getting blown out. I think this game ended up being 38-10 or 38-17. I think it was 17-10 at the half. Cardinals kind of hung around. Tough catch. Tough catch linebacker closing on the window, spins out of the tackle. 6-yard gain on a 2nd and 16, so you can say, hey, they're playing soft coverage. Very tough and physical, in my opinion, fits into any scheme. This is another example of him just basically taking over a possession. Second possession, 17-yard gain. Look at the hit that he takes. Doesn't seem to bother him. 6'1", 212, 215, depending on whether you're looking at their roster, NFL.com, or whatever. In my opinion, plays bigger than 6'1". I like the big receivers. I like the 6'4" guys. I like the 6'5" guys. I've got some FCS and HBCU talent to kind of profile on Twitter. Big receivers, Jadakiss Bonds, a couple of other guys. But this guy plays bigger than 6'1", just from the way my brain's seeing it now. Still second possession. I think very next play after a 17-yard gain. Little play action, Colt McCoy, another 17-yard gain. Through contact, holds on to the ball. I don't know if he's still elite. I don't really like that word. I did use it in a YouTube short video that I put out yesterday. He can be for large stretches of the game. I think no matter who he signs with, you're going to see similar production to what you're seeing here, at least in this area of the field. And this is where I'm going to shift this towards pretty much all Ravens focus. He does incredible work from the bottom of the numbers to the sideline. And I think that fits well with Mark Andrews, and where historically people have said Lamar Jackson is only effective, which I disagree with that notion or that assessment. Because actually I think 2021 Lamar threw the ball really well in the outer thirds of the field in terms of completion percentage and QB rating. But I might be wrong. I might have my years mixed up. I just know there was one year where, didn't throw the ball as well. The deeper in the middle of the field he threw the football, apparently. This guy, to me, actually opens up areas because Andrews likes to operate there. Andrews could do that. I liken it kind of like a basketball team. I like basketball references. I liken it to a basketball team where, and again, in the film I watched, I don't think he was great against press coverage. This is an example of it. And a couple of the plays were situations where I thought maybe the guy could have been called for a penalty. This certainly looks like one of them to me. But it didn't look as dominant against press man as I would have thought for someone who, like I said, I think plays bigger than 6'1". I think he opens up spots of the field. He doesn't utilize the middle of the field like Mark Andrews does with such a high propensity. Let's put it that way. It's not that he doesn't go into the middle of the field. Don't start that. But he operates in his most devastating fashion from the bottom of the numbers to the sideline. He can play in the slot. He can. He has catches in the middle of the field. You saw it. The touchdown catch on mesh in, I think, week 8 against Seattle. Maybe it was week 9. Was kind of caught in the middle of the field, but he had lined up on the left-hand side. I'm interested to see what the Ravens do with the receiver, what the Bills do, teams like the Cowboys or whoever. I'm going to do this with the Ravens. I'm not giving a first-round pick. No way. Especially when we don't have a second-round pick. I'm not doing that on draft night unless it's a trade-back scenario with some other team, right? So I don't think that something with DeAndre Hopkins happens before the draft. I think that you're looking at a situation where the Ravens need to have multiple contingency plans. I'm going to describe one to you. So I'm doing this for the Ravens. A path or possibility of them acquiring DeAndre Hopkins on draft night. For whatever reason, multiple players get drafted in front of the Ravens' current position that pushes good wide receivers, good corners, maybe even a good edge player or two, further down to where the Ravens are getting ready to select. Someone offers a trade back scenario to the Ravens. I don't know who. Someone 3, 4, 5 picks later, or maybe 6 or 7 picks later. But I don't think the Ravens want to get further than that. They don't want to get out of the first round and lose that, that 5th-year option for a guy. At that point, if they trade back and they gain another pick or two, then maybe they can trade that for Hopkins. I think the Ravens might have to trade a player and a draft pick for Hopkins. I do, just to make the salary work. And I might be wrong there. I'm sure there's people who know the salary structure, way better than I do. Part of this is conjecture. Part of this is just my sense of when the trade may occur. I don't think the Ravens want to show their hand before the draft. Of course, that means someone else could acquire DeAndre Hopkins before then, obviously. One point I want to make, to be honest with you, about him being dominant outside the numbers, he's not going to get suddenly older in 1 year unless he comes in out of shape, and I don't suspect that. He looks like a guy who keeps himself in incredible position, looks like a competitor, a guy who's produced at a high level, and probably after 2 years being subpar statistically overall, the total number of catches. I think 42 catches this year. Maybe I have my number wrong there. Maybe it's not 42. Maybe it was 42 the year before, and like 64 in the other year. So maybe I have it flip-flop there. But in any case, statistically low numbers for him and his career and what he can produce if he's healthy. I think you're looking at a guy who can give you, in a Ravens offense with Mark Andrews, a healthy Rashad Bateman, maybe a young wide receiver who's drafted a Devin Duvernay, Isaiah Likely, Dobbins, and whoever else we keep at running back, hopefully Gus Edwards. You're looking at a guy who there's no reason why he can't give 80, 85 catches, depending on who comes in to run the offense and how often they're throwing the football, obviously. It's difficult, I think, for Ravens fans and myself to imagine certain catch numbers or outcomes for receivers because of the offense we've watched them play in this year in 2023 and maybe even in other seasons as well. But that offense is gone, clearly. Things to like: the area of the field he operates in, the style of play, how rugged he is. Again, Bolden is the guy he reminds me of. Very strong in his routes and at the catch point. I showed you two examples, and by no means am I saying he can't beat press coverage, but he was not as good in the games I watched against press coverage, which isn't as big of a problem as some would think it is unless you're talking about third down, because most teams do not play press man against the Ravens unless you're talking about third down. You can't play man free against the Ravens and rush forward. You just can't with Lamar Jackson. He can scramble out of there and destroy that. The Bills and Bengals, two of the better defenses in the AFC that have given the Ravens fits, they play quarter split field coverages where the corners are 6, 7, 8 yards off, and they're pattern reading. They're reading number one. They're reading number two. They're reading, sometimes in some cases, just staring in at the backfield for the quarterback and then reacting based on where the quarterback looks first. DeAndre Hopkins, with off coverage as an outside receiver, I think can still be quite devastating. You guys may disagree. You may disagree that it's feasible for the Ravens or Bills or someone else to go get him. I think someone does. I think someone goes and gets him if the Cardinals make him available. I don't know what draft capital they're going to have to give up. From a Ravens standpoint, I don't think the Ravens can or would give up enough draft capital to go get him. I think they would have to possibly give a player and then lowered draft capital. If you look at some of the receivers that were acquired last year who had an impact when they were healthy, some of them were traded for quite low draft picks. I don't know what Hopkins would net for the Cardinals in return. I certainly don't think it's any lower than a second or third round pick. I don't think anything like that. And in fact, a third round pick I think is low in and of itself. The Cardinals are going to want something in return that is of value. And are the Ravens willing to give that up for a guy who has such a huge cap hit in 2023 and then a little bit lower cap hit in 2024? Yeah, I do. I do think it's a possibility because I think that the Ravens recognize they want to keep Lamar. Lamar signing would smooth this process of possibly acquiring someone like DeAndre Hopkins. Is a chicken or egg scenario, though. Is Lamar saying, I want you to go get such and such, and then I'll sign? Or the Ravens saying, hey, once you sign, then we'll go get such and such? I don't know if any of those things is true. I think the Ravens and Lamar are operating with class and generally being honest with each other because I don't see any reason why they're not, just observing their behavior. You guys let me know what you think of the video. This was a film study video, but I didn't study every play, obviously. I just showed you, I think I showed you 42 plays of DeAndre Hopkins. Let me know what you think his ability level is coming into 2023. Let's do it that way first. And then let me know what you think the chances are of some type of pathway opening up for the Ravens to go get him and add him to a Rashad Bateman, a Mark Andrews, and Isaiah Likely, because none of those guys is going to be moved. Appreciate you guys' time. If you think other NFL fans or Ravens fans would enjoy this content, please consider sharing a link on social media to help the video get more reach.